There's a specific kind of confusion that comes with this situation that I don't think gets talked about honestly enough. It's not quite anger, though anger is usually somewhere in the mix. It's not quite relief, though, if you're being truthful with yourself. Some part of you probably feels that too. It's something more tangled than either of those. A strange, disorienting cocktail of wanting someone back and knowing clearly that they hurt you, of feeling validated by their return and suspicious of it at the same time. And if you've ever sat with your phone in your hand after getting that message, that unexpected, out-of-nowhere message from someone you thought was gone, you know exactly the feeling I'm describing. What makes this moment so psychologically difficult is that it arrives with almost no warning and demands something from you immediately. There's no preparation time, no buffer, no space to figure out what you actually think and feel before you have to respond. And in that compressed, charged moment, most men make decisions that they later regret. Not because they're weak or foolish, but because nobody ever gave them a genuine framework for how to handle it. They were never taught what this moment actually is, what it means, and what the most grounded, self-respecting response actually looks like. That's what this video is about. Not how to get her back, not how to make her regret leaving, not how to play it cool enough that she chases you. This is about something more useful than any of that. Understanding why this happens, what it actually means when it does, and how to respond in a way that comes from your values rather than your wounds. And the framework I want to use to explore this comes from a school of thought that's been quietly helping men navigate exactly this kind of situation for over 2,000 years, long before dating advice was ever a category. Let's start with the question that's probably sitting at the center of everything when this happens. Why did she come back? And I want to answer that honestly, which means resisting the version of the answer that feels best and going with the version that's actually true. The most common reason women return after hurting someone is not the one men tend to hope for. It's rarely a dramatic moment of clarity where she realized what she lost and came back transformed and certain. That happens, but it's probably the least frequent reason on this list. More often, the return is driven by something quieter and more human than that. Comfort seeking. You represented something familiar, something safe, something that felt good at a point in her life, and whatever replaced that or followed it hasn't felt as good. So she reaches back, not necessarily with a plan, not necessarily with clarity about what she wants, but because the discomfort of her current situation made the memory of you feel warmer than it did when she left. There's also ego involved sometimes, and I think it's important to name that without making it villainous. The human ego has a need to know that it still has access to things it once had. It's not always conscious, it's not always malicious. But sometimes a woman reaches back simply to confirm that the door is still open, that she still matters to you, that the option is still there. She might not even act on it beyond the initial reach out. The confirmation itself was the goal. Then there's genuine feeling, real missing, real regret, a sincere desire to reconnect. This exists too, and it would be dishonest to leave it off the list. Some women come back because they genuinely processed what happened, genuinely recognized their part in it, and genuinely want something different this time. The difficulty is that from the outside, in that first moment of contact, all of these reasons can look almost identical. And that's precisely why your response needs to come from a place of clarity rather than hope. Understanding what's actually happening inside her when she reaches back out is probably the most important piece of this whole conversation, because it's the gap between what men assume her return means and what it actually means that causes the most pain in these situations. When she contacts you, she is almost certainly not in a place of full clarity. That's the first thing to understand. She's in a place of feeling, some combination of nostalgia, discomfort, curiosity, or genuine emotion that has built up enough pressure to produce the reach out. But feeling and clarity are not the same thing, and a woman who is led back to you by feeling alone, without the clarity to match it, is not in a position to give you what you actually need from a reconnection. She might think she is. She might genuinely believe in the moment that she knows what she wants. But the internal work that would make a return genuinely different from whatever happened before, that work takes longer than most returns allow for. There's also something specific happening in her around vulnerability during this window. Reaching back out after hurting someone requires her to make herself vulnerable in a way that feels genuinely uncomfortable. And that discomfort can produce a kind of fragility in the early interactions that men sometimes misread as openness or emotional readiness. She might seem softer, more attentive, more present than she was before. And she probably is, in that moment. But softness produced by the vulnerability of reaching out is different from softness that comes from genuine internal change. What this means practically is that her return is better understood as an opening than as an answer. It's the beginning of a question, not the resolution of one. And treating it as an answer, rushing back in, resuming where things left off, letting hope override your own assessment of what actually happened, is where most men lose themselves in this situation. The return deserves to be met with warmth and with discernment in equal measure. The Stoic philosophers didn't write about dating, obviously. But what they wrote about with remarkable precision was exactly this: the experience of being pulled towards something outside your control, and the very specific kind of suffering that comes from allowing your inner state to be dictated by external events. And if there's any situation in modern dating that maps cleanly onto that framework, it's this one. The core Stoic idea I want to bring into this conversation comes most clearly from Epictetus, a man who understood powerlessness in a way that was not theoretical. He was a former slave. And what he kept returning to in his teachings was a single, deceptively simple distinction. There are things within your control and things outside it. Your opinions, your responses, your values, your choices, within your control. Everything else, including what she does, why she does it, whether she comes back, what she means by it, outside your control entirely. And the Stoics were not casual about this distinction. They treated the failure to maintain it as the root cause of almost all unnecessary human suffering. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately in his journal with no intention of being read, returned to this idea constantly, not as a performance of wisdom, but as a genuine daily practice of reorientation, reminding himself again and again that his peace could not be contingent on what the world outside him decided to do, that his character was the only thing truly his. What this means in your situation is something practical and grounding. Her return is outside your control. Her reasons are outside your control. Whether she's changed, whether this means something real, whether it will be different this time, all of it outside your control. What is within your control is how you receive this moment, what values you bring to your response, whether you react from your wounds or from your wisdom. That distinction, held clearly, changes everything about how this moment feels and what it produces. The two most common ways men respond when someone who hurt them comes back are almost opposite in appearance, but they come from exactly the same place. And I think recognizing that shared root is actually the most useful thing I can offer in this section, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The first response is the collapse. She reaches out, and almost immediately the walls come down. The hurt gets minimized, the history gets rewritten slightly, and within a few conversations, things are essentially back to where they were before any of it happened. Men who respond this way aren't weak, they're hopeful. And hope is not a character flaw, but hope that isn't filtered through honest assessment of what actually happened and what has actually changed tends to land you in the same situation you were in before, often faster than the first time. The second response is performed coldness, the decision to seem unbothered, to be deliberately distant, to respond with clipped messages and manufactured indifference as a way of demonstrating that she didn't affect you. This one gets dressed up as strength sometimes, even as stoicism. But it isn't either of those things. It's a reaction. It's your hurt wearing a mask. And she can almost always feel the difference between a man who is genuinely at peace and a man who is performing peace as a defense mechanism, because performed indifference has a particular texture. It's too deliberate, too consistent, too pointed to be real. Both of these responses have the same problem at their core. They are being driven by the wound rather than by the person you actually want to be. The collapse says, "My need for this connection is bigger than my honest assessment of it." The performance says, "My need to seem unaffected is bigger than my capacity to be honest." Neither is coming from the grounded, self-possessed place that actually serves you in this moment. So what does the genuinely grounded response actually look like? Because I think this is where a lot of advice falls short. It tells you what not to do without giving you anything real to replace it with. And the Stoic response to this situation is not a technique or a script. It's an orientation, a particular way of standing in the moment that produces the right words and energy naturally, without you having to manufacture them. The first quality of a genuine Stoic response is warmth without urgency. You can be glad to hear from her. You can acknowledge the connection that existed between you, without that gladness translating into immediate availability or eagerness. Warmth says, "I remember what this was, and I'm a generous enough person to meet you with openness." Urgency says, "I needed this more than I knew." The difference between those two energies is something she will feel immediately, and more importantly, it's something you will feel, because one of them is true to who you are, and one of them is being driven by relief. The second quality is honest curiosity over hopeful assumption. Instead of immediately trying to figure out whether this means you're getting back together, or what her intentions are, or whether she's changed, genuine curiosity just asks quiet, open questions. Internal ones mostly. What is she actually saying? What is she not saying? What do I actually feel about this, separate from what I want to feel? That quality of honest inquiry, turned both outward and inward, keeps you grounded in reality rather than in the story you want to be true. The third quality is patience with the process. A Stoic response doesn't rush toward resolution. It allows the situation to reveal itself over time, through actions and consistency, rather than through the emotional temperature of a single conversation. What she does in the weeks after reaching out tells you infinitely more than what she says in the first message. And a man who understands that can respond to her return with genuine openness, while still allowing time and behavior to provide the clarity that feelings alone never can. Here's something worth sitting with honestly. Her return, whatever it means, and whatever comes of it, is also information about you. Not just about her, not just about the connection, but about where you actually are inside yourself. And I think that dimension of this moment gets almost completely overlooked in conversations about how to handle it. The intensity of your reaction when she reached out, that immediate internal shift, that particular cocktail of hope and confusion and old feeling that arrived with her message, that's data. It's telling you something about how fully you had actually processed what happened, about how much of yourself was still invested in something you thought you'd moved past. And that information is genuinely valuable, not as a source of shame, but as an honest assessment of where your work still is. Because here's what the Stoics understood about situations like this one. The external event, her return, is almost beside the point. What matters is what it reveals about your inner landscape. A man who has done the genuine work of processing hurt, of rebuilding his sense of self outside of that connection, of reaching the kind of equanimity that isn't performed but actually felt. That man receives her return differently. Not coldly, not indifferently, but from a place of genuine steadiness that changes the entire quality of the interaction. If her message sent you into an immediate spiral of hope and calculation, that's worth paying attention to. Not as a judgment, but as an honest signal that the ground beneath you is softer than you might want it to be, going into something this emotionally complex. Use this moment, whatever you decide to do with it, as a mirror. Let it show you clearly where you are. Let it inform what you need, what you're actually ready for, and what boundaries your own well-being genuinely requires. Because the most important relationship being defined in this moment isn't the one between you and her. It's the one between you and your own judgment. What I want you to take away is simpler and more lasting than any strategy. When someone who hurt you comes back, you are not obligated to collapse, and you are not obligated to perform coldness. You are allowed to be a full human being in that moment, warm and discerning, open and honest, curious and grounded. Those things are not in conflict with each other. They are actually the most attractive and most self-respecting combination you can bring to any situation, but especially this one. The Stoic wisdom that survived thousands of years isn't surviving because it's clever. It's surviving because it keeps pointing back to the same truth in different ways. That your peace, your character, your sense of self cannot be contingent on what other people decide to do. Not her return, not her reasons, not even what happens next. The only thing you ever truly own is how you show up. And showing up from your values, from your actual self, rather than from your wounds or your wants. That is the response that you'll be able to look back on with respect, regardless of how the story ends. Take your time with this. Let her actions over time speak louder than the emotion of the initial reach out. And be honest with yourself about what you actually want and what you actually need. Because those two things are not always the same, and knowing the difference matters more here than almost anywhere else. If this landed for you, leave a comment below and tell me where you are in this situation right now. I read everything, and this community has some of the most honest, self-aware conversations I've seen anywhere online. If this is the kind of content that helps you move through dating with more clarity and less confusion, a like genuinely helps this channel reach the men who need it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come join us. We go deep on this stuff every single week. I'll see you in the next one.